The purpose of this presentation is to help you understand your role and expectations for achieving our goal to get it done right, with safety as our #1 priority. We'll start off with respiratory protection. OSHA requires that anyone who wears a respirator to be fit tested prior to doing so and repeated annually. A fit test ensures that the user knows how to wear a respirator properly, ensuring there's a good seal so that all air is being filtered. When not in use, keep it in a dry, sealed container labeled with your name. There should be no facial hair interfering with the seal of the face piece. Clean the face piece after each use, and don't forget to replace cartridges after 40 hours of continued use. We wear respirators when we are performing spray application, no matter what type of paint we are using. Painting in small, enclosed areas with little or no ventilation, or high dust environments, lead abatement, and grinding concrete floors. Remember, a dust mask is not sufficient for protecting against vapors, mist, fumes, or high levels of dust. Pre-job safety analysis with your PPE. A pre-job meeting where you identify tasks to be completed, hazards associated with those tasks, measures taken to protect against those hazards. Safety audits should be conducted daily, and JSAs ensure all safety hazards are acknowledged. Online audits should be filled out each day prior to any work being started. All other inspection sheets regarding equipment should be filled out prior to the job starting as well. Personal protective equipment, or PPE. Before starting the job, you should know the following. What PPE is necessary for each task? How to properly wear PPE? How to care for, clean, and maintain PPE? Always keep all PPE with you. Each job or job site may require different PPE. A few housekeeping items to remember. Maintain waste by cleaning up paint, bucket, brushes, rollers, or used PPE daily. Keep equipment, unused paint, and sundries sorted in an organized manner, preferably out of the work area. Use drop cloths, cardboard, or plastic for paint mixing stations, and protect the work area from paint drops. Clean out trucks on a weekly basis. To conserve your hearing, many of the tasks we perform expose us to loud noises that could potentially damage our hearing. So noise-induced hearing loss is permanent, but it is 100% preventable. If you must raise your voice to be understood over background noises, that noise is hazardous. Blood-borne pathogens. Blood-borne pathogens are microorganisms such as viruses or bacteria that are present in human blood. Examples of that are hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and HIV. Blood-borne pathogens are transmitted with infectious blood, which is introduced into the bloodstream. This can be done through non-intact skin like cuts and scrapes, or through contact with mucous membranes through your eyes, nose, and mouth. It is an important rule to treat all human blood and bodily fluids as if they are infectious. Fall protection. Fact: falls are the leading cause of death in construction. A 4-foot fall can be serious or even fatal. OSHA requires that fall protection be used at elevations of 4 feet in general industry workplaces and 6 feet in the construction industry. Personal fall arrest systems. Fall protection equipment must be inspected before each use. It must not be torn, frayed, excessively painted, discolored, and the ID label must be legible. Store the fall protection equipment in a dry and clean environment to protect from damage. It is important to always use proper fall protection and adhere to job site requirements regarding the type of harness or retractable lanyard. Anchor points. Anchor points are used to secure the worker to the platform. Below are some examples of anchor points commonly seen on the job site: a beam strap, a beam anchor point, and a permanent or built-in anchor point. Aerial lifts. Always perform and document a pre-start inspection on the aerial lift and function check before each day. Things to look for: the fluid levels, leaks, wheels and tires, battery, lower level controls, steering, brakes, horn, and the guardrail and gate. Always inspect the entire workplace prior to operation around the aerial lifts. Be aware of overhead electrical and ground hazards, clearances, and area personnel. All aerial lift operators must possess a current operator's card from WW and Enroughty & Son sponsored training. Perform an operation inspection. Operate all the functions. Ensure all functions stop when the emergency stop is pressed. Scaffolding. Scaffolds are not to be used unless inspected and tagged by a competent person. Inspection must be performed daily and documented. A red tag means it is unsafe and do not use. A yellow tag means use with caution. And a green tag means that it is safe and ready for use. If a scaffold does not have a full guardrail system, such as no top rail or no toe board, fall protection must be used. Hard hats must be worn to protect from falling objects. Do not elevate your position while on a scaffold, such as using a ladder or standing on toe boards. Work on or from scaffolding is prohibited during storms or high winds. Ladder safety. Ladders should be maintained free of oil, grease, and other slipping hazards. All manufacturing labels must be legible. Ladders should not be loaded beyond the maximum intended load. Ladders with structural defects should immediately be marked "Do not use" and removed from the job site. Ladders shall only be used on stable and level surfaces and maintain 3 points of contact. Other ladder safety rules include: for portable extension ladders, they shall be used at a 4-to-1 ratio. This means that for every 4 feet of height between the base and where the ladder contacts the structure you are leaning against, the base needs to be 1 foot away. See the picture for reference. When ladders are used to access an upper landing surface, the ladder side rails shall extend at least 3 feet above the upper landing. Do not carry items up and down the ladders. Use a bucket and rope as pictured. Lockout, tagout. The OSHA standard lockout, tagout addresses the practices and procedures necessary to disable machinery or equipment, thereby preventing the release of any hazardous energy while employees perform servicing and maintenance activities. The standards outline measure for controlling hazards energy, electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, chemical, thermal, and other energy sources. Equipment is to be locked up when you're performing work or maintenance on the equipment or machinery. It should also be locked up when a worker is in the proximity of a hazard from equipment or machinery. Locking out equipment requires that a device be placed on the equipment or machine that physically prevents someone from energizing the equipment or accidentally release of energy. Locks should be labeled with your name and company. Each person shall receive their own lock and key. Only the person who applied the lock may remove it. Permit required confined space. A confined space is a large enough space for a worker to enter and perform work, but is not designed for continuous occupancy. A confined space has limited means of entry and exit. A confined space permit is required to be filled out prior to work starting or commencing. Confined space entry procedure. Monitoring atmospheric conditions. The attendant of a confined space must maintain continuous air monitoring. Results must be recorded every hour or 2 hours, depending on facility requirements. Oxygen below 19.5% can lead to suffocation and death. Above 23.5% causes fires to burn much faster. LEL. Combustible gases or vapors can result in an explosion if ignition source is introduced. Toxic gases or vapors like hydrogen sulfide and ammonia can present significant risk for workers, affecting their skin, eyes, and respiratory tract. Exposure to toxic chemicals at excessive levels for long periods of time may be lethal. Carbon monoxide is found in exhaust from engines, and hydrogen sulfide is highly flammable and toxic. A confined space team. Entry supervisor is the person in charge of entry. Authorized entrant person entering the confined space to perform the work. And the attendant or hold watch is the person placed at the entryway to the confined space to monitor working activities and conditions. An entry supervisor's role in a confined space is 1. Know the space hazards. 2. Verify emergency plans and specified entry conditions such as permits, tests, procedures, and equipment before allowing entry. 3. Terminate entry and cancel permits when entry operations are completed or if a new condition exists. 4. Verify that rescue services are available and that their means of summoning them are operable. 5. Take appropriate measures to remove unauthorized entrance. 6. Ensure that entry operations remain consistent with the entry permit and that acceptable entry conditions are maintained. The role of an authorized entrant on a confined space team. 1. Be aware of the space hazards. 2. Use appropriate PPE. 3. Maintain communication with attendant. 4. Must wear a full body harness. The attendant hold watch responsibility on a confined space team. 1. Know the hazards and behavioral effects of the hazards. 2. Monitor the atmospheric conditions. 3. Check entrance in and out upon entry and exit. 4. Communicate with entrants throughout the work period. 5. Monitor and evacuate entrance if necessary. 6. Summon rescue if needed. 7. Warn away unauthorized persons. 8. Remain at entry way until relieved. The attendant may not perform any other duties than the ones listed above. Responding to confined space emergencies. The attendant must be ready to evacuate all entrants if any unsafe or abnormal conditions arrive. This includes, but is not limited to, changes in conditions, noticing abnormal behavior from an entrant, as well as emergency situations occurring outside of the confined space. The attendant must also be ready to initiate emergency rescue services. The attendant must therefore know beforehand the proper procedures for doing so, such as the radio or telephone and the phone numbers. Fire prevention. No smoking within the vicinity of a fire hazard. Fire extinguishers must be placed near fueled equipment in case of an emergency. Always use properly labeled metal safety cans for storing fuel. No plastic. Always ensure hot work procedures are being followed. Fire extinguisher inspection and care. Sign and date the inspection tag after a positive inspection. Inspect fire extinguishers monthly. Be sure to look for the plastic seal is intact, the pin is in place, it's in good condition with no dust, dents, or rust. The gauge reads full or it's green. Third-party inspection tag is less than 1 year old. Be sure to store properly in your work vehicle. Keep secured to prevent from rolling. Keep the extinguisher canister free of paint, solvent, and other contaminants. When an extinguisher is out of date, it can be switched out through the safety department. The fire extinguisher use should refer to the PASS or PASS method to utilize the fire extinguisher. To use the extinguisher, pull the pin, aim the hose, squeeze the handle, and sweep at the base of the fire. PASS. Pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. Hazard communication. Chemicals pose a wide range of health hazards and physical hazards. Examples are irritation, flammability, corrosion, and reactivity. OSHA's hazard communication standard is designed to ensure that information about these hazards and associated protective measures are broadcast and available. This is accomplished through labeling of containers and safety data sheets, or SDS. Here are some examples of pictures for hazards. They include pictures for corrosion, an exclamation mark for irritants, an exploding bomb for self-reactives, skull and crossbones for toxic chemicals, a flame for flammables, a gas cylinder for gases under pressure, environment for aquatic toxic, health hazards for carcinogens, and a flame over a circle for oxidizers. There are actually 16 sections of safety data sheets. Those 16 sections include things like the identification of substance mixture, hazard identifications, composition or information on the ingredients, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storing, exposure controls, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information, ecological information, disposal considerations, transportation information, regulatory information, and other information. Lead abatement. Lead is poisonous to our bodies. It can damage the central nervous system, cardiovascular system, reproductive system, and much more. When absorbed by our body in high enough doses, lead can be very toxic. Short-term and long-term exposure can result in both severe damage to your body. It is important to take measures to reduce exposure to a safe limit for working. Symptoms of chronic overexposure include loss of appetite, constipation, nausea, excessive tiredness, headache, fine tremors, weakness, nervous irritability, hyperactivity, muscle and joint pain, anxiety, insomnia, numbness, dizziness. Lead is toxic to both male and female reproductive systems. For worker exposure, lead is most absorbed into the body by breathing it in. When workers breathe in lead as dust, fume, or mist, their lungs and upper respiratory tract absorb it into the body. They can also absorb lead through the digestive system if it enters the mouth and is ingested. Once in the bloodstream, lead circulates through the body and is stored in various organs and body tissues. As exposure continues, the amount stored will increase if the body absorbs more lead than is excreted, but some remains in the blood and tissues. The risk of exposures. The tasks that have a high risk of lead exposure include abrasive blasting, power tool cleaning without dust collection systems, cleanup activities, movement and removal of abrasive blasting enclosures, manual dry scraping and sanding. Protective measures. Hazard determination, including exposure assessment, medical surveillance and provisions for medical removal, job-specific compliance programs, engineering and work practice controls, respiratory protection, protective clothing and equipment, housekeeping, hygiene facilities and practices, signs, employee information and training, and record keeping. Biological monitoring. Employees will be sent for a lead blood test prior to starting a lead abatement job, as well as after the job is completed. The employer must notify each employee in writing of employee exposure assessments results within 5 working days of receiving them. Hand and power tools. Hand tools must be inspected before use. They must not be broken or have cracked handles. Only use a tool for its intended use. Remove any tools that are damaged or not working properly and return them to the shop. Never carry power tools by the cord or hose. Keep cord and hoses away from heat, oil, and sharp edges. And disconnect tools when not using them, before servicing them and cleaning them, and when changing accessories such as blades or bits. Hand and power tools like grinders. Do not remove guards or handles from grinders. Do not clamp or tie a switch in any way. Use both hands while handling a grinder. Safety glasses and a face shield are required when using a hand grinder. Abrasive blasting. Abrasive blasting is the process of removing coating from material. Key aspects of blasting include the setup, the breather box, the potman, and the blasting safety. Abrasive blasting setup. Here's an example of an abrasive blasting setup. It is key to remember that during blasting, that hoses can be a trip hazard. Always be mindful of where your hoses are and others. Hoses, couplings, and gaskets should be inspected during setup. These components are highly prone to deterioration. Check the hoses for interior deterioration. Check couplings for pinholes and interior deterioration. Check gaskets to ensure sufficient thickness. Hose connections. All blast and hose connections must be equipped with a whip check and locking safety clips. Whip checks must be fully extended on blast hoses. Colonial pipeline requires that whip checks be duct taped. Hoses must be kept as short and as straight as possible. Abrasive blasting safety PPE. The following PPE is required while abrasive blasting: a blast hood with grade D breathing air, a blast suit, blasting or leather gloves, safety toe boots, earplugs, no clamping of the nozzle controls. Abrasive blasting breather box. A breather box serves the purpose of monitoring for carbon monoxide and filters breathing air. By using a 3-stage filter system, it filters water, particles, and ultrafine particles. Abrasive blasting breather box. The power supply is two 9-volt batteries and air pressure is set between 80 and 100 psi. The breather box is designed to be used in the upright position. If it is not in the upright position, it will not filter properly. Please calibrate once a month by the safety department. Care. Keep it out of the rain. Do not throw them into the trucks. Replace the dust caps and return to WW Enroughty Safety after your job is complete. Abrasive blasting pot worker. A pot worker is an abrasive blasting operations ensures that there is adequate grit in the pot for the job. While working the pot, keep hands and eyes clear of the plunger. Keep clear of pot to hose connection and be ready to shut down the system in case of an emergency. Electrical safety awareness. Extension cords must be inspected before each use. Only use 12 gauge or larger extension cords. All cords must be 3-pronged. Any damaged cords must be discarded or removed from the job site. Keep electrical cords out of water and puddles, and always use GFCIs. GFCI awareness. A GFCI measures the amount of electrical current exiting and entering a receptacle. If it detects any difference, it immediately trips and stops the flow of power. Test and reset before each use. Powered industrial trucks. Here are some examples of powered industrial trucks. A Class 5 warehouse, a Class 7 lull, and a Class 7 rough terrain. All forklifts must be inspected prior to use each day. Seatbelts must be worn at all times. Carry loads between 4 inches and 6 inches off the ground. Tilt a load back just enough to stabilize it. Slow down and sound the horn at corners. Lower forks to the ground when finished using. Spill prevention. All substances should be stored in proper, closed containers to minimize the potential for spill. Containers should be stored in an upright, orderly way. Any spill must be immediately reported. WW Enroughty requirements. Wear Enroughty attire during the workday. Wear high visibility vest. Safety glasses, safety toe boots, and hard hats are required. Clothes must be clean. Always have proper PPE in your bag ready to use at any job site. The foreman must fill out daily job audits online. Smoking is only allowed in designated areas. Turn your timesheets in on time. Maintain job site waste buildup. And always remember, if it doesn't look safe, it isn't.